Secrets of the lake, a boy's courage, and a creature that turns into a legend. Dive into this enchanting tale. In present-day Scotland, two American tourists visit a local pub, captivated by a famous photo of the Loch Ness Monster. An elderly man reveals the photo is a fake and hints at a deeper story. Intrigued, the tourists sit with him to hear more. The tale is set in 1942, during World War II. Angus MacMorrow, a young boy, looks out at the loch, torn between curiosity and fear, imagining himself wading into the water, but haunted by visions of drowning. Instead of venturing into the loch, Angus spends his time gathering shells along the shore, thinking about his father, a Royal Navy sailor who once described the loch as an enchanted and mysterious place. One day, while exploring the shoreline, Angus uncovers a large, unusual egg buried in the sand. Fascinated, he takes it home and hides it in his father's garden shed before being called back by his mother, Anne. Anne and Angus's sister, Kirsty, notice that Angus has been withdrawn since his father's absence. In the shed, Angus carefully cleans the egg, revealing a glowing blue surface beneath the dirt, then hides it and goes to bed. That night, strange noises wake Angus. He looks out the window to see the shed door wide open. Investigating, he discovers the egg has hatched and a peculiar alien-like creature is scurrying around inside. Cautiously, Angus offers the creature a potato, gradually earning its trust. Seeing the creature has a wound, he bandages it and vows to protect it, keeping its existence a secret from everyone else. The following morning, military vehicles arrive and Angus briefly believes his father has come home. However, Captain Thomas Hamilton informs them that the Royal Air Force is taking over their manor for military purposes. Captain Hamilton explains that the house will serve as a base for operations to defend against a potential German invasion. Angus begins to worry about the safety of his new secret friend. Fearing the soldiers may harm Crusoe, Angus checks the shed only to find it destroyed by the creature in its search for food. The damage intensifies his concern for keeping Crusoe hidden. To protect his father's belongings, Angus tries to gather food for Crusoe. When Sergeant Strunk, the army cook, refuses to help, Angus improvises by dragging a garbage can to the shed, which Crusoe enthusiastically devours. Angus names the creature Crusoe, inspired by Robinson Crusoe. While Crusoe eats, Angus begins researching what kind of animal it might be. None of the possibilities match, leaving him more curious than ever. Remembering his father's tales of a mythical monster that lived in the loch, Angus begins to suspect that Crusoe might be the legendary creature. To help Crusoe survive, he pours water into a trash can to hydrate it. Meanwhile, two fishermen on the loch notice increased military activity. Captain Hamilton explains that the soldiers are preparing artillery batteries to guard against reported sightings of German U-boats in the nearby waters. While exploring the grounds, Angus encounters Sergeant Walker holding a dead deer, a grim reminder of the potential harm the soldiers could bring to Crusoe. Alarmed, Angus hurries to protect his new companion. Anne later discovers the shed in disarray. Reflecting on her husband's absence, she is interrupted by Louis Mowbray, a handyman recently hired to help with repairs. Anne tasks Louis with cleaning the shed and suspects Angus might be hiding a pet there, which he is not allowed to do. She asks Louis to handle the situation discreetly. As Louis starts emptying the trash can, Angus is stunned to see that Crusoe is gone. Upset, Angus argues with Louis to defend his father's workshop, but Louis asserts that it is now his duty to take care of it. That night, Angus searches the grounds, calling out for Crusoe. Meanwhile, Crusoe, who has grown significantly, sneaks into the family manor and accidentally encounters the military dog Churchill. After a chaotic chase through the house, Crusoe escapes, leaving the household staff to blame the mess on Churchill and the military. As Angus begins to lose hope, he hears Kirsty scream and rushes upstairs to find Crusoe hiding in her bathtub. Angus reassures Kirsty that Crusoe is harmless and makes her promise to keep his secret from their mother. Though hesitant, she agrees and notices the bathroom isn't working and asks Louis to check it while she gathers clothes that once belonged to her missing husband. When Louis politely declines the clothes, Anne reveals that her husband's ship was sunk a year ago and he has been presumed missing. She explains that Angus is struggling to accept the loss of his father. Meanwhile, Angus and Kirsty try to keep the rapidly growing Crusoe quiet, but find it increasingly difficult. Louis arrives to repair the bathroom, and despite Angus's protests, Kirsty lets him in. When Louis sees Crusoe, he immediately suggests that the creature might be a water horse, a legendary being from Celtic mythology. The legend says only one water horse exists at a time, and when it grows old, it lays an egg, passes on its legacy, and dies. While Anne searches for the children, Angus seeks Louis's help. To distract Anne Kirsty and Louis pretend they were helping fix the bathroom together, Anne grows suspicious and decides to check the bathroom herself. However, she finds it empty. Crusoe has mysteriously disappeared. Louis cleverly hides the water horse in the toilet tank, helping to mislead Anne. Still skeptical, she accepts their explanation and leaves. As Anne heads downstairs, she runs into Captain Hamilton, who invites her to a dinner he's organizing as a gesture of thanks. Anne graciously accepts the invitation. Meanwhile, Louis advises Angus to release Crusoe into the loch, insisting it's the safest place for the creature. Angus refuses, feeling strongly that Crusoe belongs with him. That evening, Anne prepares for the meal, choosing an elegant dress she hasn't worn in years. In the bathroom, Angus feeds Crusoe canned fish, but Kirsty interrupts, urging him to come downstairs to see what's happening. As they leave, Angus accidentally leaves the bathroom door ajar. Crusoe, scrambling for the fish, slips out of the bathtub. Downstairs, the military personnel and household staff enjoy dancing together, but Churchill catches a strange scent and darts off to investigate. Noticing the dog's absence, Angus and Kirsty realize something is wrong. Upstairs, Crusoe roams the hallways until he encounters Churchill. The unleashed dog chases Crusoe through the house, causing a trail of destruction. The chase leads to the hunting room, where Crusoe is horrified by the sight of mounted and stuffed animals. Angus and Kirsty follow the sounds of crashing and chaos, while downstairs, Captain Hamilton and Anne hear the commotion during the banquet. The chaos spills into the dining hall, with Churchill dashing recklessly across the banquet table, leaving destruction in his wake. Crusoe manages to slip away without being seen. Louis steps forward to apologize to Anne and the military, explaining that he was chasing the dog. Captain Hamilton remains unimpressed and voices his dissatisfaction. Louis refuses to follow Hamilton's orders, leading Hamilton to demand that Angus be sent to his room. Reluctantly, Angus obeys. Outside, Crusoe cleverly disguises himself as a statue, successfully tricking Churchill. Crusoe discovers a nearby pond teeming with fish and dives in to feast. Later, as Angus searches for Crusoe, Louis intercepts him and promises to help find the creature if Angus returns to his room. The next morning, Louis notices that Crusoe has grown significantly larger overnight and remains in the pond. He takes Angus to see the creature, and together they transport Crusoe to the loch, releasing him into his natural environment. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton confronts Louis in the shed, accusing him of being a negative influence on Angus and warning him to stay away. On the water, two fishermen accidentally hook Crusoe, only to have their small boat dragged along before they cut the line to avoid capsizing. Hamilton takes Angus under his wing, determined to mold him into a disciplined soldier. After days of grueling training, Angus manages to escape and returns to the loch, where a now fully grown Crusoe greets him with excitement. Crusoe invites Angus to ride on his back, helping him face his fear of water. Though initially hesitant, Angus gradually enjoys the experience, overcoming his fear as Crusoe dives and swims underwater. Back on land, Angus notices a metal net being installed in the loch, clearly intended as a trap for submarines. Later, Churchill escapes his military handler and begins searching for Crusoe. Angus persuades Crusoe to hide just as Sergeant Strunk arrives, but it's too late. Strunk spots Crusoe briefly before the creature disappears beneath the surface. Angus confides in Louis and Kirsty about Crusoe, thanking Louis for bringing laughter back into his life. Overhearing this, Captain Hamilton is surprised to learn that Louis is a war hero with an untarnished record. At a nearby pub, the fishermen eagerly recount their sighting of the mysterious creature, hoping the story will attract tourists to the area and bring economic benefits. The next morning, the fishermen return to the loch armed with a camera, determined to capture a photo of the creature. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton takes Anne and the children to watch the military's cannon firing practice at the loch. Angus, alarmed by the situation, tells his mother about Crusoe, but she dismisses his concerns despite Kirsty supporting him. During the cannon firing exercise, several shots narrowly miss Crusoe, prompting Angus to attempt to stop the bombardment. Angus's interference enrages Hamilton, who scolds Anne for her son's behavior and sends the family home. Believing the creature will not resurface after the attack, the fishermen decide to fabricate a photo of the Loch Ness Monster, which becomes the infamous surgeon's photo. As punishment, Angus is confined to his room every evening for a month. When the staged photo is published in the newspaper, Sergeant Strunk identifies it as resembling the creature he saw at the loch. Sergeant Walker declares his intent to hunt the creature. Kirsty discreetly helps Angus escape his bedroom with Lewis's assistance, and together they head to the loch, where Angus calls out for Crusoe. Crusoe emerges from the water roaring fiercely and snapping aggressively, still traumatized by the bombardment and his near-death experience. Despite the risk, Angus attempts to reconnect with his friend, but narrowly avoids losing his hand as Crusoe disappears into the depths. Churchill's keen sense of smell leads him to the loch, inadvertently guiding the military there as well. Armed with harpoons, soldiers set out on boats. Crusoe defends himself, killing Churchill and overturning the soldiers' boats in retaliation. One of the soldiers sends out an SOS, leading Hamilton to assume they are under German attack. He orders Anne and the children to shelter in the basement, while he organizes a defensive response. Anne realizes Angus is at the loch, and against Hamilton's orders decides to retrieve him. Meanwhile, Crusoe's attacks intensify, terrifying the soldiers. Angus wades into the water trying to stop the chaos, but slips on a rock and falls unconscious. Angus sinks beneath the surface unconscious, but Crusoe dives to save him and brings him to safety. On the shore, Lewis desperately works to revive Angus while Anne and Hamilton arrive at the scene. Angus regains consciousness and is reunited with Crusoe, who has now calmed down. Overjoyed, Angus embraces his friend and dismisses the events as fanciful nonsense, blaming Lewis for filling her children's heads with stories. Her skepticism vanishes when she spots Crusoe in the water. Angus insists the creature is peaceful, but their moment is interrupted by another cannon being fired. In a desperate attempt to protect Crusoe, Angus climbs onto his back and rides him into the water, pleading with the soldiers not to shoot. Anne watches in terror as cannon fire continues to rain down. Hamilton, Anne, and Lewis race toward the underwater net as the soldiers persist in their assault. Angus, determined to save Crusoe, guides him toward the net amidst the cannon fire and chaos. Amid the storm, the soldiers mistake Crusoe's long neck for the periscope of a German submarine, intensifying their attack. Realizing that the only way to save Crusoe is to dive, Angus and the creature plunge underwater, just reaching the net in time. Believing they've captured a German U-boat, the soldiers begin raising the nets. Crusoe pauses at the barrier as Hamilton and Lewis arrive, urging Angus to let his friend go. Reluctantly, Angus says goodbye to Crusoe, the closest friend he's ever had, and returns to his family. Crusoe dives deep into the loch before leaping triumphantly, destroying the military equipment, and disappearing into the horizon. The following morning, Angus and Anne watch the sunrise over the loch. Angus finally accepts that his father will not return and finds peace. Together, they see Crusoe swimming away into freedom. As Crusoe releases a final majestic roar, he dives beneath the water for the last time. In the present day, the old man finishes his tale, revealing that although there have been sporadic sightings of the water horse over the years, Angus never saw him again. The old man admits this because he is Angus. The tourists, satisfied with the story, leave the pub. Outside, a young mother searches for her son William, who is exploring the beach. William finds a strange rock resembling the egg that Angus once discovered, hinting that Crusoe has passed on and left behind a successor, destined to become the next water horse.